What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome back for some more Fire Emblem Heroes, and this is going to be my comprehensive analysis and review of the Distant Counter Weapon Refinery batch that we have got for Ryoma, Ike, Black Knight, Xander, Camus, Hardin, Zelgius, and I'll basically be covering every single unit in depth and what are the best builds that you could run on them in the modern times. If you do end up enjoying these kinds of videos, I would really appreciate if you could leave a like and subscribe because these videos do take a lot of time and effort to make, so your support is much appreciated. And with that said, let us get right into it. Ryoma used to be top tier unit back in 2017 when FEH came out, but he just kind of fell off. Then came his legendary version who was decent for some time, but he also fell off. And now here we are back at it again with Ryoma being top tier unit, especially legendary Ryoma because of this Raijinto weapon refine and also the legendary hero remix to Bushido, making it Bushido 2. The normal version of Ryoma, the Infantry version, also gets a really solid upgrade with this weapon refine. So this refine has extremely easy to meet conditions. It is always going to be active in the player phase or if you're within 2 spaces of an ally. So extremely easy condition to meet, and if that is met, then you get +4 to all of your stats and also null follow up. Null follow up is a huge thing to have in your weapon because it frees up your slot B skill, and in case of legendary Ryoma, flying units cannot even get null follow up. So this allows you to be a really solid unit, as we have seen time and time again on so many units who have this null follow up built into their weapon. And Bushido 2 is also a very solid upgrade to legendary Ryoma, and just to put it into perspective, with his new Raijinto weapon refine and Bushido 2, which he got in this update, he has become a very unique unit. So he has got distant counter in his weapon, he gets easy +4 to all of his stats, he has got null follow up, he has got IO shield, he has got unconditional +7 true damage per hit, and he also has speed based 40% damage reduction. And a lot of these effects flying units cannot even conventionally get, and Ryoma just gets these in his weapon and Bushido 2, which is absolutely insane, while also enjoying the benefit of the flyer mobility, which is absolutely amazing. And he also has access to the rain skills, which he can run in slot C, and with legendary hero remix, he already comes with attack speed rain, which you just have to learn. So that allows you to have free extra stats. So he's easily one of the best units in the entire game just because of the massive upgrade that he has got in this update, and easily a top tier unit in my personal opinion because he's very unique. Flying units don't have these many things at the same time. Some do, but not all of these. So Ryoma is very unique unit as a legendary hero. And the infantry version of Ryoma doesn't really have Bushido 2, but still he becomes much more viable and easily one of the better sword units, and you can even compare him to one of the top tier sword units in Marita, who also has null follow up in her weapon. Ryoma does as well, and he actually has distant counter too, so both Marita and Ryoma can have both null follow up and damage reduction by using their weapon and slot B. It's just that Marita has got the -1 special cooldown, which Ryoma does not have access to. So that is one thing that Ryoma is lacking, but in most of these situations he can definitely keep up with a lot of the modern sword units like Marita for example. So this is easily the best distant counter weapon refine of the batch. Having null follow up in your weapon is absolutely amazing. Legendary Ryoma is going to be getting a legendary hero remix this month on 13th I believe, so you can definitely try to pull him, and that banner will have spark. Even at low merges and lower investment, he can actually be a really solid unit because his weapon refine and Bushido 2 are just absolutely overtuned. So even at low merges he can run a budget build with just his default build, and he does get attack speed rain with legendary hero remix, so you just have to go there and learn those skills along with Bushido 2 and you'll be having them. And you can run speed rest solo as a sacred seal, which can definitely help him with his resistance and also help him increase the speed for the damage reduction skill. And if you want to run a mixed phase option, then Fury 3 is going to be an option, but the recall damage could be annoying, but still you could run a healing special. It's basically the cheap mixed phase option. And if you want to invest a bit more into him, then we do have speed rest solo on Urk, who's in the 3-star 4-star pool, so that could be used with attack speed solo 3, and he can be pretty fast with this condition. Now the solo skills might seem a bit odd with his weapon refinery condition, which requires him to be within 2 spaces of an ally, but just keep in mind that he can be one space away from his ally and still trigger his weapon's condition as well as the solo skill, so it's not really all that hard to achieve that. Like I said, even budget Ryoma can work pretty well, and something like this can be used in Aether Raid's offense, especially the light season, because Bramimond is a menace, and the fact that Raijinto has got null follow-up built into it just means that Bramimond is not going to be doubling you. So you can easily run this kind of build on a budget in Aether Raids whenever water season is going to be there. And with the support of Brave Lucina, he can just fire off noon times, the +7 true damage, and all of the jazz. If you want to invest even more into him, then here are some of the builds. These can of course be run on lower investments and lower merges, but higher merges are always going to be helping. So you can obtain Mirror Stance 3 from Divine Code section, and this is a pretty good option on him because it gives him extra resistance, which is always nice for a distant counter weapon user, and he also gets the guard effect, which is absolutely amazing. And this is not the most expensive option because it is available in the Divine Code section. You can also run Attack Speed Solo 4 in his Slade, and also run Mystic Boost. Mystic Boost pretty much gives him a way of healing up, and it also makes his matchups better against healers because it will disable the Wrathful Staff effect. So Mystic Boost is a pretty good option, and Attack Speed Solo in Slade is going to be a really good option if you can invest into that. And you can also go with Kestrel Stance, which is again available in the Divine Code section. I kinda prefer Attack Speed Solo more than the tier 4 stance skills, mainly because solo skills can function in both phases, and Ryoma's weapon is always going to be active in the player phase, but that's just my personal preference of using solo skills more on him. But still, if you want to use a stance skill, then Swift Stance 3 is also an option, and that does give him extra resistance and speed, and you can stack it up with more speed and resistance in form of the Sacred Seal to get even more bulky with the damage reduction and his overall resistance. Legendary Ryoma is easily going to be one of the best, if not the best option for Duel Flying 4 whenever it comes out. It is eventually going to be coming out, so you want to run Duel Flying 4 with Bushido 2. Unfortunately, if you want to score high in Arena, then you have to get rid of the Rain skill because it's not a 300 SP slot C skill. So because he has got Bushido 2, which is a 300 SP slot B skill, if you combine it with 300 SP slot A and slot C skill, he can pretty much score as if he was a 180 BST unit in Arena, and that's a big thing. And his matchups become much better in Arena because of null follow-up and the damage reduction. And the fact that he doesn't have the flyer weakness means that his matchups become much better against the common archers, which are gonna be seen in Arena. So he can be a really good Arena option if you have him at Plus and Merge, and he should definitely be a priority if you do get your hands on Duel Flying 4 whenever it comes out, because Legendary Ryoma is just going to be amazing. He scores well, he has got better matchups now, he has got a lot of good effects that will help you in your Arena runs. And also, the flyer mobility is just top tier in the Arena maps where you have trenches and so many annoying maps in general. Finally, if you want to use him in Aether Raids at max investment, then you can definitely go with a Unity skill. And with this kind of Ryoma, you can just not really care if he gets debuffed. And that's going to be pretty common in the Astro season where Mirabilis is going to be having Whimsical Dream. So attack res Unity just makes you powerful, and resistance is definitely a stat which you need a lot of. The last two builds might seem a bit weird, but these are not the standard builds which I would suggest, but just some cool alternate options that he also has access to because of his weapon. So Raijinto has got null follow-up built into it, which means that he can abuse Windsweep and still double through Windsweep while not getting counter-attacked. And that's a big boon, so you can pretty much just abuse that fact and run Susparo 3 and Life and Death and just be a player phase unit. You're not going to be using his enemy phase potential that much with this build. You can also go with Heavy Blade 4 and Galeforce. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a 4-turn Galeforce unless you run Quick and Pulse, and you can definitely get some true damage with Heavy Blade 4. So these are just the alternate options, and that's why I've put them at the very end. And as for his IVs, as you can see, for all of these builds, I've got plus speed IV, which is no brainer for a damage reduction skill in Bushido 2. And it's really good for future-proofing your Legendary Ryoma as we get faster and faster units in Fae because of the speed creep. So having a speed boon on a damage reduction unit is always going to be good. Even if it seems like an overkill many times, you're just going to be able to get max damage reduction even against the fastest units in the game. So that's why going with the plus speed IV is always going to be something that I would recommend. Now let's move on to the normal version or the infantry version of Ryoma. So this Ryoma doesn't have that much juice like legendary Ryoma with Bushido 2, the flyer mobility and all of the jazz, but he's definitely pretty good now with that Raijinto weapon refine. On like low investment and +1 merge, he can still be utilized, and he's definitely one of the better units who can be used at lower merges when it comes to Gen 1 units. And the first build is a super budget build. You can run speed res bond from Tethys and just have guard in a slot B. Windsweep can actually be used with Fury, and that can help you in arena assault. Pretty much the same thing which pilots can do, just Windsweep and safely attack and just put the pressure. And then if you want to invest a bit more into him, then you definitely want to run a damage reduction skill on his slot B, because he already has null follow up in his weapon, and here he does not have Bushido 2, so might as well get some kind of damage reduction. Close call can be a pretty good skill, and it can definitely help you with the movement shenanigans because he can function in both phases. Double solos can always be a pretty good option. You can also run attack speed solo 4 and have Spurn 3 and joint drive attack from male Chris. And this is pretty much going to be the standard Ryoma build which most people are going to be running. Spurn is going to be giving you pretty nice damage output with the extra +5 damage, and the speed stacking is going to be pretty helpful with the damage reduction build. And because he's a Gen 1 unit, you definitely want to go with the plus speed IV to make the most out of the damage reduction. And if you don't really like the solo condition, then you can even go with the push skill, but keep in mind the chip damage from this is going to be annoying. So you can run something like Mystic Boost basically to just patch it up, and you can even run a higher cooldown special if you want to, because we're not really running Spurn here. Kestrel Stance 3 is also an option, which can be useful in the enemy phase for giving you the guard effect, but I just prefer the mixed phase options like I said before with legendary Ryoma, because his weapon can work in both phases. Attack Defense Unity is also a really good option, and it does have good synergy with Raijinto, and this is going to be a pretty good option when debuffs are just so common. Ryoma is a really good user of our Duel Infantry 4 because he's got distant counter weapon, which means that he can bait out a lot of the range units, and with the damage reduction build, he can definitely be a pretty decent tank with that. We can also run Time Pulse and Ruptured Sky, and Ruptured Sky becomes a one-turn special that you can retaliate back with, so that is pretty good for the extra damage output, and that does give him pretty decent amount of one-shot potential. So Time Pulse and Ruptured Sky are going to be a pretty good option to be abused in the enemy phase. And then finally, again, like with legendary Ryoma, Windsweep is an option. Here as well it's an option, but Infantry Ryoma actually has access to Time Pulse, which means that he can have a 4-turn Galeforce. Now there are a bunch of Sword Infantry units who can do the same role better, but still again this is just an option which I'm stating for Ryoma. And then if you want to run him in Aether 8's offense, the double solo skills are always going to be a pretty good option, and you can just use Soul for your recovery, and he can function in both Light Season and in the Astro Season because he's a pretty good unit after his weapon refine. And again, Unity skill is going to be a really good option when debuffs are just so common in Aether raids. Black Knight was one of the first free-to-play units that we got in the lifespan of FEH, and he has finally got a weapon refined to his Alondite, and so has his alt Zelgius, which is a 5-star locked unit. So Alondite's weapon refine is pretty simple, but it's really practical because it gives Black Knight and Zelgius the thing which they required most, which was -1 special cooldown. Any kind of Black Knight or Zelgius player is going to be having Slaying Edge on their unit because -1 special cooldown with Black Luna is really good with Special Fighter. So this -1 special cooldown pretty much allows you to have a better Slaying Edge, and that allows you to run Special Fighter and just spam Black Lunas, which are really strong. And it also gives you easy +4 to all of your stats, which is always good for your bulk. He's definitely one of the better users of near save because of how hard he can hit, and Black Luna is still a pretty deadly special in the modern times. But the problem is that damage reduction can still reduce its damage output, so that is an annoying factor which Black Knight has to face in the modern times, and I really wish that he had some kind of Deadeye effect in his weapon to just pierce through these damage reduction skills. So the extra speed will allow him to be faster than most of the armor units, and as you'll see later on, speed investment is actually not a bad option at all. So for his builds, I will basically combine both Zelgius and Black Knight into one picture because they're pretty similar stat wise, and I personally think that Black Knight is just better because he's easily mergeable, and the stat difference between Zelgius and Black Knight isn't really all that huge. The only edge Zelgius has is that he scores better in arena, as you'll see later on. So on a budget, if you cannot have access to Special Fighter, you absolutely can run Wrath from Ninja Hana or Astrum or any of the units and pretty much mimic the Special Fighter effect by running Brave Lucina, and that can give you the enemy phase potential to just retaliate back with Black Luna. And Wrath boosted Black Lunas, even at low investment, are going to be hurting a lot and can easily one-shot many of the units. So that is a pretty good budget build that you could run on them. You can also run the form skills. Speed Rest form is present on Wrath, and then you can combine it with Wrath. And also have the attack defense form Sacred Seal, which is pretty recent. So this can give you a lot of speed, and even at plus an investment, if you don't have premium skills, this is definitely something you can work it out. And again, Brave Lucina is going to be your best friend if you do not have Special Fighter. However, if you have Special Fighter, then you're self-sufficient and you can just retaliate back with Black Lunas in the enemy phase and do a lot of damage. Distant Defense 4 is available in the Divine Code section, and it's a really cheap skill, so that can definitely help you with the distant counter weapon that they've got. And they don't have the highest resistance, so it definitely helps them. And you can just run Quick Riposte so that you can double attack. And as you have seen, attack and speed IVs are both options. And I will explain why I kind of prefer the speed IV. The thing is that Black Knight and Zelgius are one of the few armor units who are actually fast, and Special Fighter pretty much means that they can function in both phases. Of course, it is preferable to just retaliate back with Black Luna and kill the enemy, but having the extra speed means that they don't really get stopped by null follow-up if they were running something like Quick Riposte and if they were slower. Investing into speed also means that you have a better matchup against a lot of the damage reduction units who run speed-based damage reduction skills like Close Calls, Burn, and stuff like that. And as I said before, damage reduction skills can still reduce the damage output of Black Luna, so investing into their speed also helps you in that way. And just naturally doubling a lot of the times is going to be really helpful because the power creep in FEH has gone above and beyond, and we have such bulky units that even Black Luna will fail to kill them in a single hit, even at max investment. So having that natural speed to double is really good, and having that extra speed pretty much means that you're going to be freeing up their Sacred Seal, which means that you can run Mystic Boost, which is one thing they are lacking, which is self-healing, basically. So there are a lot of benefits of going with plus speed IV, even though at the first look, it might seem like going with plus attack IV is the best one for the one-shots, but plus speed can actually help you in many scenarios as well. And that's why I've got a plus speed IV Black Knight here. Attack speed bond 4 is actually not a bad option on an armor unit who are usually going to be staying near their allies, and it is available in the Divine Code section, so it is easy to get. And Armor March can be run in Slot C or even the save skill if you want to, and Mystic Boost is pretty nice for the self-sufficiency, and it does improve their matchup against these staff units. And if you don't really care about increasing their speed, then you can still stick with the plus attack IV and go with Fortress Defense Res, which is going to be helping with their bulk in both phases, which is really good. And having that extra resistance is always going to be nice with a distant counter weapon. And finally, we reach the point where you want to run the save skills, and they are really good users of the near save skills, and the bond skills function incredibly well with the save skills and will always trigger. So going with the plus speed IV with attack speed bond 4, having attack res bond is going to be a pretty good option for the near save use because they do have pretty good bulk that they can utilize. You can even run attack defense bond 4. The Sacred Seal is quite flexible, it's all up to you which option you want to run. But basically with this kind of build, they can still be pretty fast and also hit really hard against those melee enemies that they're going to be protecting their allies from. You can also run Fierce Breath and Wrath. Like I said before, Wrath boosted Black Lunas are not to be underestimated because that is going to be giving you the true damage, and Fierce Breath can give you the extra damage output and pretty much make up for the fact that you're not running Special Fighter here, so that could be utilized. Not the best option, but still an interesting option if you want to have Wrath boosted Black Lunas. Next up, if you want to use them in Aether Raid's offense, then they are definitely best used as near save units because they can pretty much be paired up with units who have really good magical bulk like Micaiah, Guinevere, Marianne, and just a lot of units which are just really fantastic mage tanks or are ranged units, and you can pretty much protect them against the melee units by running near save Black Knight or Zelgius. An attack defense unity is always going to be a good option in Aether Raids where debuffs are just so common. Now there are a couple of enemies that might annoy you, like Saros in the Astro season is gonna be really annoying because she has got Dragon Wall and she will still live through your Black Lunas most of the time because of the damage reduction, which can be really annoying. And she's blue color as well, so she can definitely hurt pretty bad. So that's why Light Season is a bit more comfy for these two. And also Eliwood can be pretty annoying, but because of the save skills, his lunge and stuff like that is going to be disabled. So even though you're not going to be able to one-shot him most of the time, he's still not going to be that big of a threat because of the save skill. You can also go with the Far Save. I would say that they're not the best users of Far Save. There are better users like Brave Hector and Brave Edelgard, but still, if you really want to use them, then this could be an option. And Fortress Defense Res is a bit better option on Zelgius because it does increase his visible resistance, which is good against AoE specials. And then finally, if you want to use them with Far Save, then Attack Res Unity is a premium option. And if you want to use them in Arena, then Black Knight can pretty much go with the Near Save skill and run the Bond skills. But Zelgius, on the other hand, because he has got a 300 SP slot B skill in Warp Powder, if you want to score high, you cannot run Special Fighter. You have to go with a 300 SP slot A and slot C skill. And the save skills are 300 SP, which is definitely a good news, but it pretty much means that you cannot really spam Black Lunas that much, but still you can trigger them rather easily. So Warp Powder is needed if you want to score high with your Zelgius in Arena, so that is a necessary evil. You can also go with Close Defense 4 if you do have Gustav for the near save, because Close Defense 4 is really helpful for ignoring the visible buffs when everyone and their mom uses rally skills in Arena. Legendary Ike and Resplendent Ike, or the original version of Ike, both get the Ragnell Weapon Refine, and Ragnell Weapon Refine unfortunately is same as Alondite, which is a bit weird. I mean, it does function and does make them a bit more viable, but I wish they got something more and this was a bit more unique. In any case, they get easy +4 to all of their stats and -1 special cooldown. And again, -1 special cooldown is always going to be useful, especially for Legendary Ike, who does have Radiant Aether 2. And the -1 special cooldown actually allows him to use Special Spiral even better, as you'll see in the builds. And the extra bulk and speed is always going to be pretty good. The original version of Ike, or Resplendent Ike, can definitely make use of the extra speed for running the damage reduction builds. But despite this weapon refine, I would say that Fallen Ike is still like light years ahead of them, because he is just a monster with that Chaos Ragnell, and he also has much better speed, and he can run the damage reduction builds much better. So even though these Ikes are a bit better, it's not like they're gonna be game breaking all of a sudden or something really special, because Fallen Ike is still gonna be the better Ike in the game, in my opinion. Still, this is pretty nice if you have invested into these Ikes, because Ike is always a fan favorite and a very popular character, so this definitely helps them be more viable. For the budget build, you can pretty much retain the base kit that he comes with. It's not going to be the best option to weapon refine your unmerged or low merged Ike, because at the end of the day, he's still an old unit, but still it can definitely be a pretty decent option to abuse with Radiant Aether 2. Warding Breath pretty much means that you're going to be able to trigger that even against the opponents who have got guard effect. But if you invest a bit more into him with merges and dragon flowers, then you can pretty much run the Thanos Ike build, which you guys might recall. And this build actually gets an upgrade. So Radiant Aether 2 was already a 4-turn special, and now with the weapon refine it becomes a 3-turn special. And because of the fact that Radiant Aether 2 gives you -2 cooldown at the start of the map, it helps you so much setting up your special spiral. I mean, you pretty much have it from start of the map, and that is really good because you can basically retaliate back with Radiant Aethers, which is going to be doing a lot of damage, and it is going to be healing up Ike. And you can let go of the breath skill in slot A and still retaliate back with Radiant Aethers. I mean, a breath skill will help you against the opponents who have got guard, but it's much better to let go of it and run an actual slot A skill which can help him get more stats or even give more effects, like the guard effect with Mirror Stance 3. So in my opinion, if you want to use Legendary Ike perfectly with this new weapon refine, then Special Spiral is the way to go for his slot B. And the Thanos Ike build is even better now, so Mirror Stance 3 is what I would recommend from the Divine Code section. Does help him with his resistance and also gives him extra attack, which is always good. And the guard effect is pretty nice because he's still rather slow after the weapon refine, so that could be done. At max investment though, you can definitely invest into his speed and he can definitely get pretty fast. And here he's pretty much reaching like 60 speed, which means that he can naturally double without having quicker post, which means that he can just run speed rail solo to get even more resistance and speed, which is really good. And it does improve his matchup against a lot of the damage reduction units in general. So again, Special Spiral is an option even with a fast Thanos Ike build. Attack Res Unity is basically the best premium option that he could run with a Thanos-like build because it just protects his attack. Even if you get debuffed, it is going to be making you stronger, and getting that extra resistance is always going to be nice on a distant counter unit. So he can definitely go with the plus attack IV for this kind of Thanos-like build if you're not going to be going for the speedy build. And even in arena, like, he's going to be a pretty good unit to be used because he's a legendary unit who has been rerun many times. He's present in the Legendary Hero remix, and having that Duel Infantry 4 means that he just is more usable in arena when it comes to scoring. And now with Special Spiral, he is pretty much going to be able to spam that Radiant Aether and be even better and win many of the matchups which previously he would have trouble with, because setting up Special Spiral in arena isn't really the easiest thing, but now it is with this weapon refine, so you could definitely go with that. If you did opt for the plus speed IV, then you can also run null follow up, and that can definitely help you in many of the matchups where the enemies are going to be having the auto follow up skills and stuff like that. Investing into speed can definitely help you if you do run proper skills like these. Both attack and speed IVs are really good on him. Attack IV does give you extra attack, and speed does open up some other options like null follow up, for example. So it really depends on your team and how you want to use him. And then finally, because he can be used in Aether raids whenever Earth season is going to be coinciding, you can pretty much run a build like this with double solo. And instead of running Special Spiral, you can actually go with null follow up, and that can allow you to deal with Bramimons much better. And null follow up in general is a pretty good option for Aether raids because we have monsters like Duel Lift running around and many of the auto follow up weapons, so you can just use Brave Lucina as a support. Moving on to Resplendent Ike, he doesn't really have Radiant Aether 2, so in my opinion he pretty much gets the shortest end of the stick compared to Black Knight, Zelgius, and even Legendary Ike, because he does not have the specials which they have. But compared to Legendary Ike, he can definitely run the damage reduction skills a bit better because he has got the Resplendent stats, and he does have a bit better speed, so that is always helpful in these kinds of damage reduction builds, especially on these older units. So that's pretty much what you want to do with him, and run double solo skills, and that can help you have a pretty nice damage reduction build. You can also go with Time Pulse and have a 2-turn special like Moonbow, Ruptured Sky, Glimmer, and that will be getting pre-charged. And having that pre-charged special means that you can basically trigger it twice in the player phase, and that is going to be giving you pretty nice damage output. And even in the enemy phase, if you have it pre-charged and if you're facing an enemy with a guard effect, then you can still retaliate back with that special. So having Time Pulse with a 2-turn special is going to be really good, and that's pretty much what you have to do in arena by running Ruptured Sky and Time Pulse, and that is pretty much how you can utilize the -1 special cooldown by running Time Pulse, which is definitely an expensive option compared to Special Spiral, which is available in the Divine Code section, and it is not the most expensive one. He can also be used in Aether raids with, again, the double solo build, and null follow up is going to be helping you a lot in the light season dealing with Bramimond, and Noontime becomes a 1-turn special which he can instantly retaliate backwards. That is pretty good for self-sufficiency. You can also go with Brave Lucina and have Bonfire and run Mystic Boost instead if you want to get the self-sufficiency, and Bonfire does give you really good damage output for one-shotting, which is always going to be useful. He can also work in the Aster season, and again, because debuffs are pretty common, if you can get your hand on a Unity skill, that is always going to be really good. Xander was one of the earliest Renter battle units in the game, and he did have a distant counter weapon, which was pretty unique for that time, but now we've got a lot of competition in the Sword Cavalry department. Xander still gets a pretty decent defensive refine that effectively gives him +5 attack, defense, and resistance because of the debuffs. So that is something I can definitely appreciate because any help to his resistance is really good. And the weapon refinery pretty much needs the foe to be above 75% HP, which is not the hardest thing to do. It also stops the enemy's follow-up attacks, which is really good for a slow tank like him, but stopping the follow-up attacks of the enemies also means that it's a bit harder for him to trigger Bonfire in a single round like he could before. Now, even though he has got the weapon refined, Xander still has many issues, and having that low resistance is definitely one of them. Even at max investment, he's also susceptible to null follow-up, and I feel like if he got a guaranteed follow-up with this weapon refine, it would have been even better because he pretty much has to run Quick Riposte if he wants to double anything. And there are also other enemy and mixed phase cavaliers like Legendary Seliph, and of course the recently released Legendary Sigurd, who has got insane movement and is very powerful with that damage reduction as well. And Reed might also get a Legendary Remix soon, and it might be really good as well. So even though he has got the weapon refine, there's still much competition in the Sword Cavalry, but still if you do like him a lot and if it built him up, then this definitely makes him a bit better. I wouldn't really suggest using Xander at low merges or low investment, and he's definitely the kind of unit you want to use at max investment if you're a big fan of him. So I would definitely suggest going with Mirror Stance 3 from the Divine Code section, as it helps him with his resistance. And speaking of resistance, Mystic Boost gives you the self-sufficiency and also improves his matchup against staff units, so both of those things can be really helpful. The guard effect is always going to be nice for a slow tank like him, and you pretty much have to run Quick Riposte on slot B because that's how you can double in the enemy phase. Attack Smoke can be a pretty nice option, and it will stack up with his in-combat debuff from his weapon. Distant Defense 4 is also an option from the Divine Code section, and it does have the dull effect, so you can ignore the visible buffs of the ranged enemies, so that can be utilized for getting some extra bulk, especially the magical bulk. And then Attack Defense Solo can always be run. There are pretty much two ways of going with Xander. Either you invest into his defense and double down on that, or you try to patch up his resistance and try to make him work as a distant counter unit, and that could definitely be done if you do run something like Attack Risk Solo in a slot A, which is going to be functioning in both phases, so it does give him pretty good damage output in the player phase even though you can hardly double. And lull skills are really good options on cavalry units, and that is something you can run and have Quick Riposte Sacred Seal. Unity skills are also not a bad option because attack and defense are pretty much his two main stats, but it does require him to be within 2 spaces of an ally. And because he has got distant counter and his weapon, and the fact that he can stop the enemy's follow-up attacks, you can definitely run Duel Cavalry 4, and he's definitely a pretty good user of that because he can retaliate back to the range units. Still, he doesn't have the highest resistance, so he's going to be losing a lot of the matchups, which you think he might win, but he's not going to be able to win because his resistance is a bit low, and those threats just hit very hard, or they have the auto follow-up, which will just break through his follow-up negation anyways. Still, it's a pretty decent option that you could run in Arena, and having that lull skill is always going to be helpful when buffs are so common. Finally, because he's got a speed super boon, you can definitely try for a speed meme build. This is definitely not optimal, and there are just much better sword cavalry units who can do the same role, but with much less investment. But if you're trying to meme with Xander and a speed, then yeah, you can run the double solo skills and basically make him reach 58 speed. I'm just listing this as a fun option. You should definitely not just go for this, and the other options are just more consistent with him. Camus and Xander both share Gradivus, and they finally got a weapon refined. These two units definitely were overshadowed for the longest time, and this weapon is basically going to be always active in the enemy phase, so it is definitely enemy phase oriented. If you want to have this activated in the player phase, then the foe needs to be at full HP, which is definitely a bit strict. So if this condition is met, then they get +4 to all of their stats, and they also get in combat healing, which is going to be 7 HP per hit. Keep in mind that this is in combat healing, which means that if they double, then they can heal up 14 HP, which is really good for self-sufficiency, and they don't really need to run Mystic Boost or Healing Special most of the time because the healing is actually pretty underrated from this weapon, and it's going to be helping you with the self-sufficiency. Camus pretty much ends up having pretty low resistance even at max investment, and he's a Gen 1 cavalry unit, so he doesn't have a lot of BST as it is. Still, he can function in both phases. Hardin just is really brutal how it happens to him because despite this weapon refine, he faces insane competition from Brave Hector, and I say this as someone who has got a +10 merged Hardin on their main account, and I've used him a lot, so I speak from experience. So unfortunately Hardin just gets dunked by Brave Hector because malted weapon refine is pretty insane. So you could have a max investment Hardin, but still a low investment Brave Hector is still going to be outperforming him because of that insane weapon refine. So he really has a tough time being a lance armor. Now you might think and compare this to the Garm weapon refine, which Brave Ephraim got, and that weapon refine also gives the self-healing and the extra stats. But keep in mind that Garm as an axe is a really good weapon which gives you the auto follow-up and also stops the enemy's follow-up attacks, and it has got incredible synergy with Weary Fighter after the weapon refine. So Brave Ephraim actually ends up being a really good unit. On the other hand, Gradivus doesn't have that many effects. The self-healing is pretty much the best thing that you get out of this. Still, Hardin is definitely much more viable than he was before, and the self-healing does help him with the self-sufficiency as an armor unit. Let's go for Camus first because he's a free-to-play unit. Unfortunately, Camus doesn't have too many options, and the way you build him up is pretty straightforward, which is stacking up a lot of speed with attack speed solo 4 and speed rest solo, which does have good synergy with his cavalry movement, and you run lull attack speed and pretty much try to make him bulky on the resistance side as well as make him fast so that he can naturally double and not really get doubled that much. And this is pretty much going to be your main staple option on Camus, which you're going to be seeing. Because Gradivus is definitely a bit more enemy-faced option, you can definitely go with Mirror Stance 3 again from Divine Code's section. Just these distant counter units can make fantastic use of Mirror Stance 3, so that could be run, and that can allow you to have the guard effect and the extra resistance. Swift Stance is also an option which can increase his resistance and his speed, which is pretty much going to be the aim of these builds. And whenever B-Duel Cavalry comes out, which is going to be inevitable, he can be used in Arena as well. Because of having the distant counter weapon, he can bait out the range units, and the self-healing is going to be really helpful in Arena because he doesn't really have to run any kind of healing special and can just go with Ruptured Sky, which is going to be a nice low cooldown special, and that is going to be helping you a lot in Arena. Now we move on to Hardin. So at low merges and low investment, Hardin's base kit just conflicts with the Weapon Refine because the Brazen skill, the Vengeance special that he has got, has anti-synergy with the healing. Bullfighter also has kind of an anti-synergy with the Gradivus Weapon Refine because it's more enemy phase focused, but still on a budget Bullfighter could be run as long as the enemy is at full HP. So don't really run Savage Blow and stuff like that with a budget Hardin. And Fury can be run. Keep in mind that the healing that you get is in combat, and Fury's recall damage is going to be post-combat. So you're going to be still taking the chip damage, but you're going to be able to heal up quite a lot. And if you just feed him Mufasa from the Divine Code section and give him Distant Defense 4 and Vengeful Fighter, he can still be pretty decent on a budget with this kind of Weapon Refine because he can just get extra stats and the healing is going to be pretty nice. He can also be run with Fortress Defense Res and Crafty Fighter from Gatry, and this can allow him to have the guard effect as well as better bulk, and he can definitely be used with the Far Save skill, but of course this is nowhere near as good as Far Save Brave Hector, but still this is an option that Hardin can run. He can pretty much try to mimic Brave Hector and the way he deals with debuffs with the Unity skills if you have access to those, and the save skills are going to be a pretty good option that you could run on him. I've used Hardin a lot in Arena because I did plus and merch him back when he came out because I just kept getting more copies of him, and using Hardin in the Arena has been a painful experience till when I cared about Arena. The self-healing cannot be understated because it is going to be helping you survive, which is going to be really important in Arena facing all of those annoying threats. The thing is that Hardin still has the armor weakness, so you gotta watch out for certain enemies who do have armor effective weapons. And he can pretty much run Ruptured Sky and Special Fighter and retaliate back with this special with the save skill, and that is the best case use of Hardin with this kind of Weapon Refine in Arena scenario. He's a 175 BST unit, so still he can score decently well in Arena. Overall, this batch of Weapon Refines is pretty tame. The only Weapon Refine that just stands out is going to be Ryoma's Raijinto Refine, and that's because he's a 5-star logged unit. All of the other units have pretty tame Weapon Refine. I feel like they could have gotten, one more effect, and that could have helped them a lot. But this is pretty much the state of distant counter Weapon Refines at this point, and it definitely makes them more viable. I think the best one is easily going to be the Raijinto Weapon Refine, and after that, I would say that Alondite is really good for Black Luna spamming, and Legendary Eye can also make pretty good use of the Radiant Aether too. And after that, probably, Xander and Camus. Hardin kind of faces the short end of the stick because of the brutal competition, but still the self-healing is pretty decent that you get out of Gradivus. So that is going to be my opinion on the DC Weapon Refines. Let me know in the comments what is your opinion of them. I'll be eager to hear that. And make sure to share this video with your friends who are trying to build up any of these units who have got a new Weapon Refine. I've gone over multiple options that you can utilize, and I want to thank all of my YouTube members for their constant support. And if you enjoyed, then please be sure to leave a like and a comment. Helps me tremendously, and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell because YouTube sub boxes are about as functional as arrows against Legendary Ryoma. So that's it, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.